everybody. Welcome back to Real Talk Realty Podcast, where we put the real in real estate. You are with your host, JD.
And Gabby.
And Louie.
And we have our great friend, Rob, back in here to discuss a lot of good information that has recently come to light here in the real estate world. And one of the biggest things being that we just, for the first time since 2019, hit 1 million listings active on the market.
No. Louie.
Louis with the happy fingers. But no, we want to talk about what that means and the implications it's going to have for you as a buyer and as for a seller who's contemplating listing, and kind of what it's going to mean in the market here, specifically in the DMV, but also a little bit about what it's meaning for the rest of the country and kind of what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. So thanks for joining us today. And Rob, thanks for coming back on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
So with that being said, Rob, with the million listings that are now on the market, how would you describe the current supply of homes on the market compared with the last 5 years?
Yeah, so the numbers right now with inventory is up significantly, and that is, I think, one of the things that's affecting sellers right now, and them feeling that we're not really in a seller's market anymore, because it's starting to feel a little stressful on the market. We've seen a lot of properties getting a lot less showings than they used to, and that's kind of weird, being that there's a lot more inventory.
Right.
And a lot of that comes back to, in the pandemic, when there was so little inventory, there was more likelihood that someone was going to buy that house because there just wasn't much on the market. Now buyers have choice. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot less of that frenzy happening, and people are starting to see that frenzy happening a lot less. And I think that's why people are starting to feel like, are we in a shift?
Right. And that's exactly why in our meetings a lot of the times we're talking about seller expectations and how to set that correctly, because it is a different vibe, different feeling out there. I know specifically, many of my listings right now, I priced them right, and they're beautiful houses, they're perfect, but it's the activity is lower, and I think that there's a lot of things that play into that. So are you guys feeling that as well on some of your listings?
Absolutely, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I just had a client lower the price on his house today, actually. So.
And didn't we just say today it was like 1/3 of sellers right now are in a situation where they're making a price adjustment of some sort?
That's correct. As far as sellers' price expectations, Rob, do you think they're lining up with what buyers are willing to pay?
And I think that's the second piece that comes into this, is that the seller expectations aren't. So there was a study done by Keeping Current Matters and Realtor.com found that seller expectations are right now 80% are overpricing their homes.
Wow.
Why is that?
I think people are just so used to what, we were seeing sell over the last couple years, especially during 2021 and 22, when there was so little inventory and people were getting escalations and, over asking price. People are so used to that, and it's hard to wrap your mind that the market is kind of in a deceleration, meaning that it's not appreciating as high or as quickly as it was before. We're still seeing appreciation, about 1-2% versus previously at almost 40.
Which really, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 and 3% was kind of the norm before everything went absolutely bonkers.
Absolutely. And I just think it's such a dramatic change from around 40% down to 1-2%.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. I think it's better.
And it's like, we talked about it a little bit too today, was where when you're doing a CMA or a comparable market analysis and we're trying to come up with a price that's going to cause a property to sell, I think there's many agents out there that are also still relying on older data, as well as their clients themselves. Like the clients, they remember when Jim Bob across the street last year, sold his house for X amount of money and had multiple offers and, had a deadline and all these things. And really, you just got to remember that is a different time. It was a different scenario. The inventory was much lower than it is right now.
They have to consider the current market,
right?
Not a year ago. The current market says something different.
That's why your most recent closings are a better and more accurate indication of where you should realistically be when you're coming up with that price.
So now we are seeing some homes that are sitting a lot longer, and now we have a better chance to get our buyers, like seller, closing costs, all that kind of stuff, right? So I have some sellers that are seeing houses sitting, so they're like, whoa, like the market is shifting. Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should not sell because these houses are taking much longer to sell than they were previously, right? What would you say, I guess, to that?
First thing I would say is, do you have to sell right now? Because that's going to be the number one thing. If you have to sell, you have to sell. And so then it comes down to, let's have a good strategy and let's price it right. If we price it right and at the beginning, at the onset of the listing, we're going to have a better chance of getting those buyers. If we try at that insanely high price, for a couple of weeks, we may miss out on all the buyers that would have maybe bought that house at being at the wrong price. And so if a seller has to sell right now, I would tell them, we need to really be strategic about how we price it, how we prepare the house, and the condition. It needs to be a 9 out of 10. Yeah. Like, it needs to be super clean. It needs to show really well. Like, it's no longer 2020 when you could just throw the trash on the floor and people still buy it for $50,000 over list. But if you don't have to sell, you may want to wait it out. Maybe you rent your house for a period of time. If if you're seeing that for some reason in your neighborhood or your area that it's languishing, then it may be a consideration. What would you be looking for? Interest rates.
Rates.
The interest rate drop is really what's going to change. Right now, we still have low inventory. So statistically, a buyer's market versus seller's market means that a seller's market means you have less inventory than it takes to sustain a normal market. And we found that that's about 6 months for a normal market. So less than 6 months is a seller's market, more than 6 months is a buyer's market. And so
so we're still in a seller's market.
We're still in a seller's market. We still have low, we hit that we hit that milestone of inventory nationally, and which we haven't seen since 2019, which shows that we're growing that inventory. But where we were in 2020 and 21, we were at 1 month's worth of inventory to 2 months worth of inventory. We started to see even in our area that we're about 2 to 3 months worth of inventory. So we're moving in the right direction, but we're still technically in a seller's market. The real lever that needs to happen to release this pressure on buyers is the interest rates. And so, they're now talking, as of 2 days ago, now they're saying possibly in July. So if you're not sure, you see your neighborhood isn't moving, obviously talk to a professional, talk to one of us. If you're in our area or if you're out of our area, talk to a professional real estate agent to understand what's going on, because not everywhere is the exact same. And depending, there's still houses that we were writing that have multiple offers.
Right.
Let's talk about interest rates. One more thing. What are the parameters that need to be in place in order for the feds to lower the interest rate?
Well, and that's the thing. So we've already hit those parameters. We need to be at around 2% inflation, which we're just above 2%. And, we need our unemployment to be under that 5%, which we're around 4.5%. They lowered the rates when we were at inflation rates of 6-7+% previously. Mm-hmm. So you would think that they should be doing that now. Up until a couple months ago, I understood why they wanted to hold the rates, because, again, they're trying to curb inflation. But I think we're there. And ultimately, I think the housing market now really needs it.
That's true.
What was the inflation like 6 months ago?
I don't remember. I think it was around 3 or so.
Yeah, so it's been slowly but surely coming down.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wonder if they're waiting for a magic number in order to start lowering the rates.
I don't know. But when they come down, that's going to make a big change in the market. So buyers right now, one thing you have is, if you have the funds and you're financially able to, there are better deals on the market right now. Depending on where you are, there might be some good deals that houses that are sitting. Yeah. You're going to be able to get seller concessions. You're going to be able to get a discounted price. Mm-hmm. You're definitely going to get a home inspection, and you're probably going to get inspection repairs even.
Yeah, right? I just had one go under contract in Mount Airy. It was only on the market for like 17 days. It was really good condition, but they were willing to pay all of my buyer's closing cost. So, that's just a situation. The house was really nice, but it's been, sitting, whereas years ago it would be like a multiple offer situation. So
right.
It is definitely a good time to get.
The reality of the situation is, it sounds like we're heading into a more stable market, something that's, going to benefit the space in the long run. So with that being said, when we're coming up with some prices for our sellers, one thing that I always try to pay attention to is not what a property closed for, but what did it list for, right? And then what did they get, right? Mm-hmm. So if you see a property that's closed for $600,000, right, and they listed for originally say $570,000, I'm gonna suggest, if my seller's house is very comparable to that, I'm gonna suggest that they also list at $570,000. You don't want to go for what they closed for, right? Because now you're kind of stretching it. And I think if you can price it correctly, you want to replicate what somebody else's success was. So if they listed in that $570,000, which kind of leads me into my next thing. So, what does the current relationship between asking price and final prices tell us about market momentum?
What it tells you is that the buyers don't have the appetite and the ability to take on the prices that the sellers want.
Right.
And I think that comes back down to the affordability with the interest rate. And I think we feel that with our buyers a lot of times, because otherwise they would have made the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it too, it's like with a higher interest rate and prices being at the absolute premium that we've ever seen them, it's almost like buyers are saying, you know what, we want our houses to be perfect, right? For this price. And a lot of these listings out there, I will tell you, are not.
That is so true. I question some sellers. Are they motivated to really sell their house?
Right.
Yeah.
Really? The houses have to be in good condition and in sometimes great condition in order for buyers to make an offer.
Yeah.
And some sellers are just not cutting the mustard.
They're not. And I recently took out one of my buyers. We're in the market for a townhome, and we looked at like 7 different townhomes here in Frederick. And his kind of the way he saw that was every house that we saw was less than perfect, and every house that we saw was wanting a premium price. And they were all actually had been sitting there for 10 plus days. So
that's telling you that people are still thinking in the past.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
They're thinking in the past.
Well, I think it's easy to do so too if you're not necessarily in this day in and day out. And as you guys know, over the last year or so, many of the people that are in the real estate industry have been leaving. If they were just a part-timer or maybe somebody did a low amount of volume and just didn't have a lot of experience, we're seeing them leave the industry. And the people that are doing this day in and day out on a high level, we are really the ones that are seeing it in live time. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. That's why I talk about, list price is so important, and just when looking at the data that is recent, not going off outdated data.
You want to laugh? I showed a house yesterday. It was listed at $729,000. And it was a 1970 time capsule. I'm talking shag rug, oil lamps.
Yeah.
Everything had to be updated in that house.
Yeah.
And my client walked out.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I think a lot of sellers still think we're in like COVID, where you can just list your house for whatever and get like these crazy bids, and that's what they expect.
That's just not the case. That's not the case, right, Rob?
It's hard to break that mental gap. I remember just getting buyers to get under the understanding that they're going to have to write over list price.
Right.
That took a while to get people used to. And then people were like, and then when it slowed down, it's like, wait, I can not pay full price.
Right.
It's like, I don't know if that. And then explaining to sellers, you're probably not going to get full price.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to your neighbor isn't probably going to happen to you.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think the most important thing is, going back to what you were saying, JD, is there's a lot of agents that got in the business in 2021, 22, and it was a very different business, and it was very easy. Mm-hmm. And you didn't have to have any knowledge or understanding of how the business works. And you didn't have to actually really give any advice, because you were just throwing it on the MLS and you were winning.
Right.
Now, those sellers, by the way, you may have lost money because that agent probably didn't know how to get you more money for that. That's another story. However,
that's another podcast.
That is a very true thing.
But what sets us apart, and also is important for sellers, you really need to interview and make sure you're working with someone that understands what's going on.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that you're hiring an agent that is going to give you real advice, because going in with the right expectations is going to help you sell your house. Sellers that don't sell their house, they're embarrassed.
Yeah.
They're stressed. I mean,
Yeah.
I've sold my own home. It's stressful.
Yeah.
Even knowing that I'm doing all the right things to make it happen,
Sure.
I know that it's stressful.
You were stressed the first day.
First day. The moment you don't have an offer, you are stressed.
Yeah.
And that's something that sellers need to realize. Like, you don't want to overprice your house. That's going to be the worst thing for you, because almost always make less money than if you price it right with the right strategy and have good condition. You're going to get what you ask for.
Yeah. You can get yourself in a pretty dangerous situation chasing the market downwards, right? Where it's like you price it too high, then you wait too long to do a price adjustment, and now you're just kind of throwing things at the wall, just trying to get it under contract. And that is, I always say, we've said this before on the podcast, the danger or the risk of overpricing your house is far greater than the risk of underpricing it.
Then there are people out there that will not listen to your advice, and
Right.
they will not lower the price. And they'll sit, and then they'll fire you.
Yeah. But here's the thing.
Get another agent in there, and that agent's going to sell it for the price that you
Right.
decided to list it for.
Exactly. But that's why here at the Rob Krop team, we talk about this all the time, and we do not buy listings. And buy listings, for those of you who do not know what that means, it means a listing agent coming into your house, giving a listing presentation and telling you everything that you want to hear. And if you want to list a property that is above market value with no supportive data, this agent agrees with the expectation that he'll just get you to lower that price later down the road. And that's what we call buying a listing. And unfortunately, there are agents out there that do that. We do not take a listing if the data does not support the price. We would rather not do that. Right.
We don't take a listing if the client does not listen to our advice.
We don't want to create a failure for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
I mean, it looks bad on us if we lie to you and say, yeah, it's going to sell for this, and we know that it's not. That would be so disingenuous, and
Yeah.
it would be silly for us to do that. Now, oftentimes we're the second call because most of those listings do expire.
Yep.
And that's one of the big things that's been up in the market. In fact, year to date, it's 17.6% of homes that were listed this year have expired.
What a change.
What a change.
Man, I remember when there was expired listings still lingering around in 2018 and 19, and it was actually a great form of lead generation, was doing the expired listings, and you're starting to see that come back again. It might be something that we need to kind of prepare for.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely.
So Rob, how significant is the recent change in days on market? What does it mean for buyers and sellers alike?
Well, so in 2021, it was around 17 days. In 2023, it was up to 26 days on market.
Is that national?
National.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. And then as of 2025, we're at 33 days on market.
Wow.
Here in Frederick, we're around 24, 26, just to bring it into local numbers, but still much higher than we were before.
Right.
I mean, realistically, in our area, 2020 and 21, I don't think a property sat on for 7 days.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason it sat on for 7 days is because they were waiting to get more offers.
So we as good agents have to advise and let our clients know what the average day on market is, so they are aware and have that conversation now,
Yeah.
and not have it later.
It's
Absolutely.
setting those expectations up front. Yeah.
Yes.
And also, just to touch on it, because it did just come up, but it is very important for you, if you are reading about the real estate market and what's going on out there, to pay attention to whether the numbers you're looking at are national or whether they're local. Because obviously, the DMV is one of the most resilient markets here in the country. And if you get caught up looking at, taking advice from, national data, that could be also harmful.
That is so
That's
true,
true.
because Florida market is way off right now compared to our market.
Big time.
It's big time.
Well, and when you think about that, like with like the South and out West, like their market, they're above 2019 inventory levels. Whereas here in the Northeast, we're actually still below overall. And again, it tells you there's a different, each area is going to be different. So depending on what you're reading, like just keep that in mind. Going back to what you were asking about with days on market, and the idea of, pricing things right at the beginning, the most important time frame in a listing is those first 7 days. What you don't realize is that when a listing hits the market, those are the most likely time that you're going to get offers and high offers, that first 7 days. We've seen it stretch into the 10 towards the 14, but really those first 7 days are so crucial in a listing because everyone's seen it. Every real estate website is going to promote brand new listings. And so during that time, you're getting additional promotion that you normally won't get, regardless if you list it again. It's getting out there the first time, and that first impression is everything.
So getting the price just right is vital.
Crucial. If you don't do that, you've missed out on those buyers. And like JD was saying, now you're chasing it all the way down. And that's the most stressful.
It really is. And I think right now, too, this is maybe a little off topic, but the perfect launch, right, aside from just pricing it correctly, which is obviously the most important thing you could do, I also am a huge fan of the first weekend hitting with an open house.
Absolutely.
That is like the perfect launch, right? Because you're getting the attention organically by being a brand new listing on the market on all these third-party websites. But if you're also doing an open house, that's another thing that the algorithm is going to take into account and put you in prominent placement ahead of a lot of other things that are sitting there. So that's one thing that I definitely encourage.
Yeah.
Oh, and because you have someone sitting the open house, like there's more opportunities for buyers to be able to go and view. There are a lot of sellers that don't like the idea of open houses. We love them. It's part of our normal listing plan. Like what JD said, like our goal is to kind of create a blitz of people at the house for that open house.
I actually had a client recently, and I was like, yeah, I want to do an open house on the very first weekend, then we go active. And he said, well, don't you think that's a little desperate? I'm like, oh, hold on here. The name of the game is bodies through the door here, okay? There's nothing desperate about that. Yeah. We want to get some people through the front door. And you're going to find those people that are, they could be labeled a tire kicker, but I've seen a million times a tire kicker walk in, maybe not have their pre-approval ready or any of that, right? And they fall in love with the house, and boom, now that's all they needed to go ahead and get that process started.
That's right.
And next thing you know, they're making an offer. So.
Correct.
It's definitely an effective method.
I believe in it. I sold my second house at the open house. The buyer was getting ready to re-sign their lease. They decided they fell in love with the townhouse we were selling, and they bought it the next day.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm a true believer in open houses. And in fact, it used to be that Realtor.com put out that less than 1% of real estate sales ever happened at open houses. That stat has gone up to about 7% in the last couple years.
I'm surprised it's not even higher, to be honest.
Yeah, well, the formula that really has worked for our team is pricing it right.
Yeah.
Listing it as coming soon, a week or two.
Yep.
Going live on a Thursday, and then open house that weekend, Saturday or Sunday.
And then if you're doing really good, deadline by Monday or Tuesday.
That's correct.
We've been hearing more about listings expiring before they sell. So what's behind that trend, and how should agents respond?
A lot of that is coming back to because they're pricing it too high. They're missing out on those buyers, and they're getting frustrated with that agent. Oftentimes, that agent may have bought the listing, like you were talking about. Yeah. And which makes sense because about 37% of those do relist with a much lower listing price. Surprisingly, about 17% of them do list at the same price, and the remainder actually does list higher sometimes.
What in the hell?
Which is crazy, but again, they were lied to the first time, so I don't see why they don't feel like they were lied to the second time.
I could see a second agent kind of swinging in there and being like, you know what? I think you priced it too low the first time. Let's jack it up. Let's do another 20.
We had that. You remember?
Someone fired us because we told them that the price was wrong based on what the market was telling you. This is as the market's coming down, and we said you need to price here. That person was like, "Nah, you guys are wrong." Fired us. Then went to a different agent, increased his price, and then sat on the market for another 30 plus days, and then eventually sold at the price that we told him.
Oh my God!
Don't you love that?
That crowd was crazy. Makes you so mad. Like,
did you call him up again and say, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you, I told you so"?
No,
I told Rob to.
God, the urge to do that would have been strong.
Yeah.
It was a good enough win. I now know. Yes, in my gut, I was right about those things.
Yeah.
But that's what 20 years has done. It's been able. That's what the numbers do. It's like we're able to come in and give you good advice.
But that's also for him, like it's an experience that he'll be like, okay, crap, like they were right. Like I know he knows that we were right.
Probably
right?
call you up next time.
So yeah, like
5
he
years.
can think about like for future if he wants to sell, listen to the agent.
Like, hey, Rob, from 5 years ago, I just wanted to say I'm sorry, but I am ready to sell this house.
It's okay. It's okay. It's really important to have honest conversations with your sellers up front. give them good expectations. I think it's really important to even let people know here's what worst case scenario looks like, and to plan for those things.
Right.
Because if you plan for it, then the stress level is going to be much less, because it's understood that that's what's going to happen. And I think the biggest stressful thing in real estate is that nothing is really planned.
Yeah.
You know, like you get into this, people don't sell their house every day.
Yeah.
When they do, and it's on the market and no one's buying it, it's stressful. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
You know?
And one thing about the market is, no matter what shape it's in, it will tell you exactly what you need to do if you're paying attention, right?
Right.
So,
Keyword.
yeah, if you're paying attention. But yeah, if your listing is sitting there and you're noticing you have not only are you not getting offers, but you're not getting showings. That is an indication right there. Within, if you go 10 days without a showing,
It's price.
it's price. And you need to make that adjustment swiftly.
So we have like a few minutes, maybe like 2 minutes. So Rob, tell us like the best advice right now that you can give a buyer and a seller based on today's market and where we are. What would you tell them?
If you're a buyer, right now is a phenomenal time to get out and buy. If you have the funds to do so, yes, money's more expensive to borrow, but there are deals to be had right now. And I do believe that the values will continue to rise, especially here in the DMV. Naturally, I don't know, every area is going to be different. So, with buyers, you're going to be getting a deal and you're still going to be gaining that equity long term. I'm not going to tell you to, date the rate, but
Date the rate, marry the home, man.
Yeah. But eventually the rates should come back down, and that will allow a lot more relief for people. Sellers, if you don't have to sell right now, maybe wait till we start seeing some of those rate drops, because that will increase some chances. If you do have to sell, I would also say that it's not a bad time to sell. Just are there better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Can you be a little bit more patient?
right. Well,
That's exactly right. Yep.
and just if you prepare your house right, if you really set the stage with a great prepared home, you get great photos, and then you price it exactly where it needs to be, so that you're going to get competition, you will make the money you want to make. But if you're trying to squeeze every penny out of it, I promise you will probably be chasing it all the way down. But again, every neighborhood's different. So when you call and talk to somebody like us, we'll run a CMA and show you what days on market are doing right in your neighborhood, in your area, because that's really what's all going to make the difference.
Absolutely.
All right.
we got 10
JD, take us
seconds.
home.
Well, we thank you all for joining us this week, and we're going to be doing this more with Rob. We're going to have him on here the last Tuesday of every month for a month recap, but thanks for joining us, and until next
Bye,
time.
guys.
Bye-bye.